Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the Security News Update for the week ending January 14th, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. I have talked about in the past the concept of pig butchering. It is a scam where hackers, usually in a foreign country, in particular, there's a whole region in Myanmar where they're doing this, um, attempt to separate people from their money, often elderly people, often their entire life savings, and often not likely to get any of their money back. One of the common scams that they use is a cryptocurrency scam. They set up a fake site. They entice people to invest. They tell them how much money they made. Um, Sometimes they give them a little bit of their money back, certainly not always. And but effectively, it's a social engineering attack that encourages people to invest more and more of their savings with the hope of getting ridiculously rich. And in fact, what happens is they get butchered and they lose all their money. Um, Apparently, there is a faction of rebels in Myanmar who are not terribly fond of the military junta, and they've taken control of the Kokang region, which is where uh, literally an entire city has been set up, where people are held prisoner and forced to conduct these scams under the threat of "we're going to kill you if you don't." Um, that's a pretty good incentive for most people. The junta is not very fond of this whole thing, so they took control of this region. The government actually ceded control of the region to the rebels, and rebels say they have a goal of rooting out these organized scamming operations that have been protected by the ruling junta. Um, we shall see what happens, whether these kind of scams decrease now that the rebels are in control. And I don't know how kind and gentle they're going to be to the people that were previously running these operations. Um, their lives may be cut short, don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, since this is a kind of a military operation on the part of the rebels. Next, there is a new Mirai style botnet. This time, as opposed to targeting routers and IoT devices, it's targeting SSH servers. The good news is that it's not that sophisticated, but like Mirai, it's targeting easy to guess passwords. So there's several things that you can do to protect yourself. A lot of these networks are using it for crypto mining. So other than slowing down your server and basically crypto mining with your money rather than their money, and it doesn't look like they're trying to steal your data, at least not at the moment. Next, under reference, the Pentagon has released their first ever national defense industrial strategy. This is, trying to address the issue of that there is not sufficient resources for the Defense Department to acquire all of the stuff that they need to acquire. This came about after the supply chain breakdown that was originally started with COVID, but they say there's four key pillars that they want to address. One is reinforcing the supply chain. Number two is the workforce. Number three is acquisition flexibility, which is something which has never been the Pentagon's strong suit. And number four is economic deterrence against other countries. Um, and whether you sell to the Pentagon or not, I think this is a good read. It's about 60 pages. You might be able to read it lightly, but certainly interesting to see what their thinking is. And this is, by the way, I mean, the challenge that the Pentagon is facing is really not much different than the challenge that most companies are facing. Um, Next, in the software and hardware checkout department, this is pretty cool. Microsoft is testing 80 gigabit per second USB support in Windows 11. Now, to me, that sounds pretty fast. So I'm pretty excited about that. It just runs on a normal USB-C cable. Right now, it only works on select Intel Core 14th generation HX series mobile processors. Whew, that's a mouthful, but I suspect they'll increase it. There must be some stuff that's processor specific that they need to deal with. The software is available today on the Insider Preview build, 23.6.15, but it will be released shortly, I'm sure. And if that's something that's of use to you, if you transfer large things, I mean, nowadays I know, I have like, uh, 10, 20 terabyte USB hard drives that I use. Getting something that moves at that kind of speed would be really pretty cool. Next, under legislative and legal, the states continue to do this, and I understand why they're doing it because the politicians are pandering to their base. But at Ohio, they passed something called the Parental Notification by Social Media Operators Act. The law says that websites that have users under the age of 16 in Ohio who can interact with each other, kind of like social media, but not necessarily limited to that, the websites must obtain verifiable, doesn't say what that means, parental, doesn't say who that is, consent, doesn't say what that means, before children can create an account. It excludes established media sites whose primary purpose is to report news and current events. The Twitter, I think, would say that they fall in that category, so they think they're exempt. How does it exactly, does a website know who my parent is? I have no clue. It doesn't require them to use any kind of age verification technology, but it does threaten them with massive fines if they don't do it right. So, the theory is that websites will, err on the side of being scared of the state, as opposed to, actually figuring out whether they, are required to do anything under the law. The Ohio Attorney General tried to fool the court into believing this is a law about contracts and helping parents protect their kids, understanding of the contracts they're getting into. Well, I think most kids know bloody well, what Facebook means way better than their parents. So this has really nothing to do with contracts. This is about censorship. Um, we shall see what happens. Right now, the law has been enjoined by federal court for several reasons. I'm sure this thing will go on for a while, but as more and more states implement these sort of wacko, undefined laws, because it's all about the children, and that's always good for a certain sector of their base. But the problem is these are the same lawmakers who are completely clueless about technology, and so they create these things which are meaningless and undefined and unconstitutionally vague. So that won't stop them from trying, but they're just going to get shot down. But maybe they don't really care. They can blame the courts and say, "Look, we tried, but the courts they're bad, and we need to get rid of the courts or something because monarchy works much better, or perhaps an emperor works much better." That seems to be what's going on in certain states. In the breaches department, there's a bunch. Loan Depot, which is a huge mortgage lender, they originated $17 billion in loans last year, $140 billion in their servicing portfolio. They following in the steps of Fidelity and First American and Mr. Cooper and others who recently been hacked. Likely they were forced to disclose this breach quickly because of the new SEC disclosure rules. And the rules only require you to disclose if the breach is significant, so it must have been significant. What we've seen in a lot of cases is sometimes it takes as much as a year for these companies to disclose a breach because they're hoping they can figure out a way not to disclose it. But this new SEC rules may in fact be a way to force companies to be a little bit more proactive in their security practices because they don't want to have to disclose breaches. The interesting thing, of course, is most companies really don't understand computer stuff. At least the executive level don't understand computers. So this attack happened on a Friday about a week ago, or maybe it's Thursday. Sorry, Thursday. Um, and the company figured, well, we can kind of sit on this for a while. Of course, their websites weren't working and their phones weren't working. So social media just started skewering them on Friday. And then eventually on Monday afternoon, they said, oh, gee, we got a problem. You got to figure out if you're hit by a cyber attack and it's taking you offline and your customers are used to being interacting with you online and be able to call your customer service and stuff. You just can't wait and say, gee, let's think about this for a while and figure out how we can spin this positively. You've got to react, and that means you got to have a plan in advance. And if you don't, and you need help with that, please contact us. But I'm sure this was, dictated by the company's lawyers, and didn't work reputationally. I can tell you, what people are going to say. Oh yeah, those are the guys who just got hacked. I think we'll use somebody else instead. Um, Fidelity, who I just mentioned got hacked, has now admitted that hackers stole data on over 1 million customers. This was an attack that happened in November, so it's reasonably timely. They say they've notified the customers. Of course, the way we found out about it is they notified the attorney generals, and several attorney generals post the notifications online. They didn't actually say anything. Um, Fidelity is not saying what data was stolen, but that'll come out in the lawsuits. I'm sure there'll be a lot. Oh, I know there's already some. There'll be a lot of lawsuits, I'm sure, by the time this is done. Assuming that it is what I think it is, these are the mortgage closing documents, which includes your loan application, all kinds of verifications. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that hackers would like. So the lawsuit, I'm sure, will be juicy. Next, HMG Healthcare, which is based in Texas outside of Houston, confirmed that hackers stole, God, this is great, personal data of residents and employees, but they don't know what data. On top of that, the hack occurred, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. They didn't notice the hack until November. When the lawsuits happen, is this going to be one of the things? Well, adequate security. Yeah, we didn't find out about it for 5 months, and then we didn't tell people about it for another couple of months. I'm sure that'll be up to a jury to decide. But you might not want to, leave your hands in the hands of 12 people who have been hacked multiple times and probably not terribly happy about that. So again, if you need help protecting yourself, obviously, please give us a call. Next, U.S. Navy shipbuilder leaked information on 17,000 people. In case you're wondering why the Pentagon is so hell-bent to get CMMC out the door, even though it's taken them years, that's kind of the government's rulemaking process. And this is kind of a hint. Fincantieri, a Marine group, which is the U.S. arm of the Italian shipbuilder Fincantieri, filed the mandatory regulatory filing in Maine 9 months after the ransomware attack that apparently leaked info on 17,000 people. These guys are building ships for the Navy, including the Littoral Combat Ship and the Constellation class guided missile frigate. You think maybe the Chinese might be interested in the people who are working on that, see if they can blackmail any of them to go give them information. And then, just recently, another Navy shipbuilder, Ostal, admitted they were hacked, but only after the ransomware gang outed them. So these are the reasons why the government is so gang-ho on CMMC. Next, this keeps on keeping on. A startup PC maker I've never heard of before called Framework, and their claim to fame, the reason why they're big is for users to be able to easily repair their own computers. They were hacked on January 9th. They discovered it on January 11th, and they reported it on January 12th, so a duration of 3 days. That's got to be a role model, perhaps a record for how quickly people have disclosed it. Turns out that the hackers compromised one of their vendors, supply chain risk, right? The vendor was their external accounting firm, and socially engineered them to go off and have them cough up data on their customers. But still, 3 days, pretty impressive. Next, financial institutions, whether it's a broker, stockbroker, or bank, or whatever, they're required to what the government calls know your customer, and that means verifying the identity of those people before they open an account. These financial institutions typically try to make this as lightweight as possible because they don't really care to do it; they're just being forced to do it, and they don't want to create any friction for their customers to not open an account or go someplace else. But what we're seeing is that AI is likely making the most popular mechanisms that these guys use completely useless. They're probably not going to change what they're doing until the Fed step in and sue them, or there's a breach and somebody else sues them. But it's going to happen. And if you have any know your customer requirements, you might want to review them. If you need help with that, contact us, because AI is going to make that definitely more of a challenge. Next, the FTC settles an unprecedented case that they're calling it against a data broker, and I think it is unprecedented. The FTC whacked this particular broker because they're selling precise location data. And the one that the FTC is worried about is, they're selling data on where you go to church and what doctors you're seeing and stuff like that. But could just as easily be where your kids go to school, or if you're cheating on your spouse, where you're spending the night or weekends. So there's a lot of things there, a lot of opportunities to go off and blackmail people or threaten them in other ways. So FTC said you can't do that. Apparently, they've sort of kind of stopped doing that. But to say the FTC seriously disapproved and whacked them is probably a bit of an understatement. But word to the wise, and of course that data is already out there because they've been selling it for years. Next, the UK government is being accused of being misleading, as in not very transparent, on a new encryption bill. No government likes it when they can't snoop on their citizens. The UK is no different, but they've been pretty aggressive on this. They created this thing called the Investigatory Powers Act, and now they're amending it. And what that supposedly, what the bill says is that companies that do business in the UK, although they claim this is extraterritorial, that it impacts companies worldwide, although companies that don't do business in the UK will just kind of, blow them a raspberry, have to get the government's approval anytime they make a change to their system that could potentially impact the government's ability to snoop on customers. Meta, being Meta and being as large as they are, and kind of giving the finger to the UK government, said, well, okay, since you're doing this, I think what we'll do is we'll turn on end-to-end encryption for everything before this law goes into effect, so that we don't have to get the government's permission. But if you think about large companies, whether it's Amazon or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, they make hundreds and hundreds of changes a day. And if they have to wait for the government to approve their changes, that's just going to seriously impact their ability to do business. Both Apple and Meta have threatened to leave the country if this becomes law. Usually those are kind of idle threats, but you never can tell. The UK is kind of, half the size of California, so it's not a big market, but nobody likes to lose business anyway. But it might be an interesting threat to kind of tell the government that, if you want to go explain to all your, Apple users why it is Apple says they're no longer doing business in the country, and their devices no longer function the way they thought they would function, and Apple's going to come back when they get sued and say, government regulation, not our fault, don't blame us. It's not, we shall see what happens, but it's certainly not framing up very well for the government. Lastly, in the security news bites, Kimba Walden, who was the temporary national cyber director, was passed over for somebody else she is a black female, was passed over for a white male. is now heading up a new Paladin venture. She's the CEO, and Paladin, of course, has more money than a lot of people, and they have really built an amazing team of tech heavyweights. And this is kind of a public policy venture, so it's going to be really interesting what happens there. Paladin already has a significant ability to leverage their size and power. This is only going to make that bigger. Next, a group of GOP lawmakers got bent out of shape when the head of the Pentagon was in the hospital, General Austin, and didn't tell anybody about it, which, kind of get the point there. That's not good on him. But they build this as a national security threat because he is directly in the chain of command for launching nukes. Well, it turns out that the Secretary of Defense has nothing to do with launching nukes. Now, the people who were propagating this story were obviously from the other party, but they were on the Armed Services Committee. And you would think that people who are on the Armed Services Committee would know how nukes get launched, at least in concept. And the president might consult them. Doesn't have to, but probably would before launching a nuke. But he's not in the chain of command at all. Next, WebMD has decided the way to get people who want to work virtually back to the office is to threaten them. That will work to the extent that people don't want to look for a new job. But with the labor market tightening again, unemployment down again, probably not a great strategy. I just saw a segment on 60 Minutes that says that there's 95 million square feet of vacant office space in New York City alone. That's probably not good for the companies. They don't want to pay rent on vacant office space. But on the other hand, threatening employees, all that's going to do is get your best employees to leave because they're the ones who have the easiest opportunity to find new jobs, and you'll be left with the people who find it hard to get a new job. Next, email. eBay has agreed to pay $3 million to settle a cyber stalking suit. They apparently got bent out of shape by this mom and pop who had some blog that nobody reads that was beating up eBay for their practices. They sent out a bunch of employees to go off and, put mail dead animals to them, feces. I mean, just kind of really, childish, moronic things. The company agreed to pay $3 million. They're still the target of a civil lawsuit by these people, but they made the people's life pretty hellish for a long time. So $3 million is certainly a minor price to pay for this kind of thing, but it might tell them that it's not really a good strategy. And last, Fox TV has suggested, Taylor Swift has been an advocate for getting her fans to vote, register, and to vote both. And they've decided, and they're reporting that Taylor Swift is a Pentagon psyop. So you go figure that out. I can't quite do that, but wrap my arms around that. But that's what one of their hosts said very publicly on his show. It doesn't seem out of character for Fox, but it is obviously a bit entertaining if you're not in the middle of that. But the Pentagon kind of laughed it off and said, "No, she's not a psyop for us. Thank you very much." And given how much money Taylor Swift has, she probably doesn't need to work for the Pentagon anyway. So anyway, with that, that's all I have for today. If you have questions or need assistance, always please reach out to us. And until next time, stay safe.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.